Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today we're very lucky to be joined by Jesse Davidson. Jesse is the Vice President of People Analytics at 21st Century Fox. Jesse, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks for joining us. Jesse, tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and your journey to where we are today.
Great. I think when you look across people analytics, a lot of people that have come into this space, I would say in a non-traditional path, especially when you look at kind of historically in the human resources practice. I came from this space, I think, even more indirectly. I thought I wanted to be an actor when I graduated from college, and obviously that did not work out because no one has heard of me. So I did that for a couple of years, and then when you do that, you get to learn a lot about people. So that's, I think, where acting really helped me think through, how do I interact with people? What is people's emotional concepts? How do people inner monologue concepts? I did that for 2 to 3 years after college, and then decided to travel for a couple of years and went around Australia, New Zealand, did a lot of random jobs. And when I got back to the US, looking at what's that next stage in your life, which I think a lot of kind of people in their late 20s are starting, start to really to reassess. I ended up going back and getting a degree in organizational psychology. So that was kind of my path into people analytics. So I had done psychology as well, a lot of psychology research in my college days. So when I got back to the US, I ended up working at a research lab up at Columbia doing psychopharmacological research. And that was not something that I wanted to do. Being in a lab all day. Yeah. While I liked the research itself, the application of it was very limited. So yeah. The ability to look at something on a broader scale brought me to organizational psychology. So that's where I got my my basic chops. I got my master's in org psych, and that led me to an opportunity to work at Pfizer. So Pfizer's headquarters is in New York City. I worked for them for a number of years, started out working on their overall employee engagement survey, which then led me to a position on their analytics team, which they had newly formed. I was in that team supporting some of our commercial divisions and some of our centers of excellence to help HR, kind of that transition from traditional HR, where we're always focused on the people, and that always needs to exist, to help think through, all right, we're focusing on the people, but how can we look at the trends within our people to kind of take that step back so we can see where we might have another way of making strategic decisions. So I did that for a number of years, and then got the opportunity to go to a company called Covestro, which is was part of Bayer. It was their material science division, and that was a great opportunity as I start to think through, how do we do the similar type of practice for them? So focusing here in the North America region, and building, kind of those foundational pieces that I think a lot of people think about when they think of analytics is, your reports, dashboards, scorecards, things like that. And then how do we then kind of shift that into more, I guess, new methodologies? Mm-hmm. And that's what led me to 21st Century Fox. So I'm fairly new to the company. I've been here about 3 months, but very excited to be here and kind of doing a lot of different initiatives right now to kind of understand where we are and see where we can go.
Fantastic. Very interesting journey. And it's funny how no one I've spoken to in your space started out wanting to or who plans to go into that area. One, because it's so new.
Yeah, exactly.
It didn't exist as a career path.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's one reason, obviously. But, you were planning to be an actor, and some of the other members I've spoken to, again, it's nothing to do with HR.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people I've met, they start off as engineers, or they start off as in marketing. Marketing is a great example, because marketing, a lot of the things that we do in people analytics, we steal from marketing, because marketing's been doing this for 20 plus years. Yeah. So they are well founded in their practices. So, but I think from an HR perspective, we're just now scratching the surface of what we can do.
Yeah, it is the most exciting area to be involved in right now. I think it's such a exciting area. Everyone's pretty much on the beginning of their journey. No one's really advanced, apart from maybe Google and Shell. There's a few companies that are doing it for sort of 5 to 10 years, but not many. And you just said it completely right. Every other part of the business has been through this journey. Finance has always been ingrained in analytics. Then, of course, marketing went through its transformation as well. All of the function, sales has obviously now gone from driven by analytics. So now it's time for HR. So it's only natural, I think, based on where all of the other different parts of the business have gone. Now it's HR's turn as well. So very, very interesting. When you think about HR analytics, what does that mean to you? And why is it so important for the business?
I think when I think about, people or HR analytics or workforce analytics, I think there's a lot of different names for it.
There's a lot, I realized.
There's a lot of different names for it. I think everyone calls it people analytics is because I think it drove from Google, because Google was kind of first into the space, and that was their people operation. So they called it their people analytics team. So I think that's kind of the nomenclature I hear most often, but I've heard arguments for workforce analytics because it's not just about the people. Sometimes it's about the interaction of people and technology and other types of.
That's what they call it at Facebook.
Yeah, workforce. Yeah. So I think the concept people analytics is kind of, it's like a thread that runs all along the various aspects of HR. So it's not a singular function of this is just reporting. I think traditionally when people have kind of thought of analytics, and for HR, it's your reporting team. So just give me a roster of all of your employees and then maybe do some summation on that. So that was kind of the first phase. But I think now it's how do we help every aspect of HR and beyond HR, even the business, start thinking through how do people impact what we're doing in our strategy. So part of that needs to be the same thing with like a car. You need to be able to first understand how fast you're going. You need to understand how much oil you have. You need to understand how much gas you have. You need a check engine light to come on if there's an issue. People analytics, I think, is a kind of space to help navigate that for all the different functions of HR and the business. Yeah. So that's, I think the main goal is, I think you'll hear this from a lot of people, is how do we help HR take data and turn that into insights?
Yeah,
I think that's the kind of common thread, and we can do that from the recruiting end, from the employee life cycle, the very beginning, to the talent management portion, to career development, to even the kind of attrition leaving part, and then beyond that, how do our people start to impact our actual business outcomes?
Mm-hmm. Well, fantastic. I completely agree with everything you said there. And also, it has even HR analytics has shifted itself, as you said, originally from what it was originally put together for now. It's much more strategic and the overall business, not just HR. And that's very, very important. Being in a new organization, I think it's to really help our members, because many of them are just recruiting this role in their organization or creating it or pulling someone in for finance to start this role. When you first joined 21st Century Fox, what was in your first sort of 30 days, what was the focus?
So my first 30 days were really assessing the landscape and starting to identify who are the various stakeholders across the company. And I think that's where anyone should start. Sometimes we want to get in and just jump in and do something.
Yeah, that's why I asked.
I mean, that's been my approach at some other companies. I guess it depends on the organizational culture, but sometimes I think it's the same thing in innovation. Is sometimes for innovation or creativity to work, you need space. And if you just jump into something, you might not have built up enough space to be able to make sure you're doing the right direction. So my first kind of focus has really been about assessing the landscape. Where are all of our data sources? How are we defining things? Who is using data right now currently? How are they using it? And then looking at that and then trying to identify where are there places that we can help provide new opportunities. Also a big part of the work is doing an HCM implementation, a new human capital management system. Mm-hmm. And how can we leverage that? So that became kind of my focus over my first 90 days. So now my focus right now is how do we leverage this system to provide insights to HR. So that's kind of my focus. That's my main stakeholder group, my HR business partners. How do I provide information to them that they can then go off and do something with? And then, that's that foundational piece. And then beyond that, thinking through where are some methodologies in this space that we can maybe disrupt in HR. So kind of more assessing that. That's been a kind of a secondary focus.
Fantastic. And I think, again, what you said is very important. Before going straight in, you need to understand what are the business needs first, engage the stakeholders, find out what they're working on, what are the key strategic areas that they need help with, or perhaps you can provide value in, then start there rather than just sort of jumping in and trying to throw everything out there as well. So
exactly. I mean, and the thing is, I think HR sells itself short. I hear a lot, you'll talk traditionally to, HR people that have traditionally grown up in the HR space.
Yes.
If you were to kind of paint a profile of different finance versus marketing versus HR is always much more prone to more empathetic personality profiles. And they always say, I hear this a lot, well, I'm not really a data person. And I think people sell themselves short. I think HR sells themselves short because, first of all, if you're a capable person, you can learn this. It's not, we're not, I don't want to come in and tell you, hey, here's this neural network analysis. I need you to do it for me. That I never expect.
Of course.
To learn. But anyone this day and age, I think understands data. I mean, you have to. I mean, we see this all over the place from, looking at Google Trends or, all the various media aspects. You see data, insights, polls, surveys, graphs. It's all over the place. I think people are exposed to it more. And I think that people's confidence, I think, is always what always they shy away from. So how do I help build up people's confidence and just saying, like, you will understand that you understand people. So we're just going to take people and we're just going to aggregate them into a kind of a different concept, but you're still going to, I think they sell themselves short. So how do we help build that confidence up as something?
No, I can say from speaking to HR generalists every day that I completely agree with you. And that is the feedback that I get from them as well. And those that have just jumped in the deep end have realized, and even me, I had to educate myself on in this area. I've been speaking about culture and talent and leadership and all of the areas of HR for many, many years. HR analytics is one area which I wasn't really familiar with. And when I started educating myself, doing a bit of reading, a bit of research, I realized, oh, actually, you know what? It isn't as complicated as I initially thought. There's a lot of these big words going around, and there's a lot of things like AI, and there's so many people just like, people. You can understand why though, can't you?
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand why
people are doing that. On that point, especially being in leading and building the function now where you are, what skills do you think companies need to develop in order to build a successful HR analytics function?
I think that's a really interesting approach. I think I've seen it done differently in different organizations. I think as you build up a team, you can have it, it can be done in multiple ways, but I think the key to it is making sure you have a diverse team. So the skills that you'll want are very hard to find in one person. So if you think about people analytics, I think there's kind of four major things that you need. You need business and HR acumen. You need statistical knowledge. You need data visualization, graphical kind of design knowledge. And then you need this kind of consultative practice, right? So these kind of four main buckets of skills. It's very hard to find, someone that has great consulting skills and HR business skills. That's also a data scientist and is amazing at design, right? Very hard to do. And it's also in specializing, right? At some point, people tend to specialize in one way or another. So I think as you build up the skills, if you look for across those four main pieces, those are the things I always think about focusing on. And first, focus on the need for your business. Getting someone that's really deep into data science might not be the first place that you want to start. If right now, let's say you have a limited scope of reporting. If your reporting is mainly, here's an Excel columns and rows, and maybe a couple aggregations of summations, and that's it, if that's where you are, bringing in someone that's really deep into data and the stats and the computation, probably not the best place to start, because you need to build up the foundation. So bringing in someone actually that can turn that data into like visuals, graphical visuals, that's probably a better place to start.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, once people get that foundational piece, then you can start thinking, all right, now that we have this understanding, we've built the kind of the dashboard in the car. Now people can see what's going on. Now what's going on under the hood. And that's where your data scientist, that statistical data science person can come in and help build up those skills.
Mm-hmm.
So
is that pretty much basically what you're doing right now? You're in the process of assessing what are the skills that I need to build in my team based on the business needs?
I think that's, and a lot of times it's not even about finding it. I think the talent exists already in the company. It's just how do you leverage it? So I think with any company, when you're building any type of concept, sometimes we're so quick to look externally that we're not looking internally. But a lot of times it already exists here. We just have to find it, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing HR talks about in career development. We always talk about career development. We're always let's go out externally and we have to go find someone because we don't have the skill. Well, do we have someone internally that already has a skill? Do we have someone internally that wants to learn this skill so we can help develop them? It's the same thing with people analytics. It's how can we leverage who we already have? And then in time, if you need kind of different skills, you might have to go out and look for it, or you find people that want to develop those internally.
Yeah. And also, well, first and foremost, when I first started in this area, I didn't realize that 90% of the leaders I'm speaking to, like yourself, came within organizations. They weren't hired in, and they were developed internally. And that was a surprise to me originally, because when I look outside, even on LinkedIn, everyone's hiring the new head of HR analytics. There's so much going on. There's all these recruitment companies now popping up all over the place around HR analytics, all these consulting companies. And then when I finally got into the area, I realized that all of the heads, directors and VPs of HR analytics, they all came within and were developed, which was a big shock to me. Actually. I realized that. As you said, there's multiple values. One, they already know the business, which is amazing. So you don't have to go through that whole piece because they understand the organization and straight away. Now it's about if they have the willingness to learn, and then they can be upskilled that way as well. And of course, there's only a small pool of talent in this area that exists because it's so new. So if you're relying purely on recruiting this talent internally, you're gonna have a big challenge on your hands there. So yeah, completely agree with that. In terms of the buy-in side, because that's a big thing for our leaders, something I get the biggest challenge that comes up at our events and on our virtual series is, we have all this data now, but how do we present it in a language that the business can understand? What have you found to be the most effective way to engage with the leadership team and to create a story around HR analytics that you can present internally?
I think that story is, you definitely touch upon it. Like that is critical. I think it's still a challenge within the people analytics space. People that I talk to and people that, I've talked to people at companies that have been had this kind of function for a decade now, and they still sometimes have challenges. I think part of it has to do with, I think, that fear of the unknown. Is like, with HR traditionally says, I don't get data, I'm not a data person, right? So first we have to break down that barrier. I think secondly, it's about identifying the people who are champions of it. And I think you'll hear this a lot of people say, we can't, when we think about like a product adaptation life cycle, you have this very small sliver, you're like techo geeks, like they're gonna like jump on anything, right? There's the people in line at Apple at 1 a.m, 3 days before to get the new iPhone, like those kind of that early adapter. And then you have the kind of that next small segment, kind of your innovative adapters, right? So that's only a small portion. And then I think those people you can always work with. And then there's what they have that's called this chasm, right? So going from this little sliver, how do I jump over to kind of more the mass of the population? And then of course you have your laggards, which sometimes I suggest typically not focusing on them unless they have a lot of organizational political influence.
Sure.
So that chasm is, I think that's the hard part, right? That's what we're kind of, how do you have people adapt these stories? And that's still the challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, you can look to Google Glass and see, they had they did not do the chasm very well. And that's why Google Glass failed. So
Really?
I think the same thing, if you think about that in people analytics, we have the early adapters and the people that will be on board from the beginning, working on that kind of how to, overcome that chasm is the challenge. I've think, some of the best ways of working on that is just continually showing the value.
100%.
It's continually showing the value. So, and making things easy. I think that's always a challenge as well. We can do a lot, but sometimes we do a lot and we make it more complex. So how do we make it easier? And that's what we're selling. I think, in our conversation right before this, we talked about time, right? We're selling time. I mean, you think about these innovators, Ubers and Amazons. What's their competitive advantage? They're providing convenience and saving you time. So if we think about that from people analytics perspective, this is going to save you time. This is going to help you get to something quicker so you can focus on something else. So I think that's a kind of a critical message to kind of use when building out this journey.
Yeah, I think it's so important as well, isn't it? It's an area which isn't as focused on. You do so much work beforehand.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to the critical time of actually presenting it and trying to create a business case, there's not enough attention seen to it. This is from the conversations that I've had that are spent in that area. And I think Dawn Klinghofer over at Microsoft said it very well when she said that was her biggest battle. 15 years. She was doing HR analytics before it was even a thing.
Yeah.
15 years ago, if you can only imagine, when she's presenting HR analytics, she said, you know what she did? She just decided to listen to every single stakeholder's challenges, go away, come back to them with the results, and say, you know what you were talking about last week, and you mentioned this. Actually, the data doesn't support that, and let's save you some time and not going down that road. Or on the other hand, going, you know what you said the other day? Here's the data. You're completely right. You're 100% right. Let's go ahead with that.
Yeah.
And it was just removing the friction for them and giving them the data that backed up what they were saying and thinking to go ahead and make it happen in the business. And that really, she got to the point where it was the other way around now. They're just knocking on her door every day. And she told me, Chris, I have to hold them off.
Yeah.
And then obviously that spread throughout the business. And then it became a culture of, the culture changed, and obviously it spread down throughout the organization. I think one thing I would say from the feedback is you have to be more proactive as well, and not just wait for people to come to you. It's not going to happen.
In the beginning, you've got to be proactive. Yes. You've got to be the one out there. But it's like that with any new product.
It's true.
Right? I mean, every new product needs to have a champion. You need to be out there every day, pushing the streets, listening to your customers. I try to approach this I really do. I look a lot about product development because I think that they do this well. They've been doing it for half a century, right? The whole product research as well. And it works, right? You can identify, companies that do product development lifecycle really well. How do I infuse that in people analytics? So I think a great place, if you want to build this, look to your product adoption lifecycle and see what you can leverage from those concepts to kind of create a people analytics function.
Amazing. Before we move on to the quickfire round, could you share a project perhaps that you've been through or in the past? Obviously, I know you've just joined this organization with even within Covestro or Pfizer that stands out to you that you're proud of and that you could share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think one thing that I was very proud of, and it was definitely, I think, taking us to a different level of thinking, was we were looking at succession planning and how do we think through succession planning. You hear a lot of people say that what I was hearing was our data quality is not very good. Well, your data quality is not good because you don't actually report out on the data. So people, if they don't see it, then therefore they don't think they need to actually do anything with it. So therefore you kind of have this, back and forth catch-22. Exactly. It's not going to go anywhere. So first what we started to do was, all right, let's start reporting on our kind of succession health. But when we were thinking through it, we thought, well, what does succession health look like? I mean, does it just, I have a mass of people for a identified position? Is that what healthy looks like? Because if you start to think about it more broadly, you think, that's not really the case. 20 people, if they're the wrong 20 people, is not a healthy succession pipeline. So if it's 20 people that are all potentially flight risks, that's not a very healthy succession pipeline either. So we kind of came up with some thinking around how do we build an algorithm to kind of identify the healthiness of our succession pipeline. I think it was a way of looking at the talent planning perspective differently, that created a lot of interesting conversations that had them thinking through their talent differently, things that they necessarily weren't focusing on before, they were thinking through now. What does a healthy pipeline look like? Because before it was the exercise, this person's high potential, let's put them on the list. Versus
what does high potential mean in this day?
Yeah, that's another story. But if you have one person on everyone's succession pipeline, then you don't have a very healthy pipeline, right? Yeah. So, because last I checked, I cannot cut up one person into 10 different roles. Mm-hmm. That would be a mess. So I think that was something that I really was proud of. We kind of took a gamble. We went in that direction, and I think we helped produce a lot of very interesting conversations that normally weren't happening.
So was it really the end goal was to inspire those conversations?
It was to have people think differently about what succession is. Sometimes that's a critical thing I think of analytics is how do we infuse new ways of thinking into our practices. Mm-hmm. And that was I think a great example. And the idea was, and then, the longer term goal was to utilize this more broadly across a larger population. Yeah. Which we did somewhat, but, that adoption life cycle again is, we kind of focus here and we'll see, over time, we need to develop how do we get over that chasm. I think that was an obstacle that we maybe didn't necessarily work on as much as we should have. Yeah. But I think that initial piece was a really good product.
Perfect. And what feedback did you get from the team?
I think, we got a lot of great feedback. I think, that's where the main thing that I heard was this allowed us to have conversations that we haven't had in years.
Yes. Because
they've been doing this for, 20 years at this point. So it allowed them to have conversations and to approach it in a different way. Mm-hmm. I think that was the main feedback. Also, I think that I also heard the feedback of it's great, but I don't know if we can adapt this more broadly based on the organizational culture. Was it ripe for something going broader and bigger? I don't think it was the right time. That was also feedback that we got.
Yeah, you're going to hear that with everything.
You're going to hear that with everything. Yeah.
You're going to hear that with everything. But I think you hit on a good point there where sometimes just those insights just spark those questions that would normally not come up. And then from those questions, it creates new thinkings, new ideas. And then, then you start challenging what you're currently doing. Just because it's even working one way doesn't mean it can be working even better.
And that's what innovation is, right? That's what innovation is. If you go, any innovation research is, it's all about how do you spark a new way of thinking.
Yeah.
That's all it is. There's methods that you can do. There's different ways of approaching it. But if that's our goal, if we say we want to be an innovative company, and I feel like every company I've seen says they want to be an innovative company, then if you want to be innovative, you gotta put the bones behind it to actually do
you gotta take risks. Even in my own industry, so it's it's the training, the events industry, whatever you want to call it. But I'm always trying to completely do things which are not typically seen as our industry. I.e. the virtual series, i.e. the podcast that we're on right now, just always adding new elements to what we do, and trying to constantly innovate and adapt. And obviously we're lucky enough to be a small organization that we can make those quick decisions and not have to worry about the rest of the organization upsetting anyone. But it's so important now. And you only have to look at certain businesses that are creating products which have nothing to do with their original business.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with their original business, but they're creating products around there just in case. You only have to look at Amazon, right? Started off as selling books.
Now they're selling everything.
Everything. And now they've
web services.
Web services, their own tablets, the
Yeah.
Alexa. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Yeah. Alexa's going to talk behind me now. Sorry about that. So yeah, it's pretty crazy now. So very interesting. Well, look, that leads us quite nicely onto the quickfire round, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
Okay. 30 seconds. All right.
Sit up in your seat.
See if I can be succinct.
No problem. What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in the HR analytics space?
I would say it was just experience, a broad swath of experience. So to do people analytics, I think you need to understand HR, you need to understand business strategy. So I think that experience is what did it. Hence why I went back and got my MBA as well, because I think I needed that more broad business acumen experience.
Fantastic. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Business advice. Oh gosh, 30 seconds.
Take your time.
I think there's a difference between taking a risk and forging the unknown. So a risk means you can calculate against risk, but the unknown, that unicorn, to really be that innovative space, sometimes there's no risk. You can't calculate risk because it's never been done before. Mm-hmm. So sometimes if we want to go big, it's not about assessing risk, it's about challenging ourselves and going into the unknown.
Fantastic. I like the way you put that as well, because it's very interesting area. What's one book you'd recommend to our audience and why?
Actually, I have it.
Oh, great. Even better.
I think this is a great book. It's Strategic Analytics. So it's not just focusing on people analytics by Alec Levinson over at, I think, the Marshall School of Business at University of Southern California. So it's a kind of a really good approach of how you can look at analytics in general. So I read this, I read it, and I've kind of always tend to go back to it.
Fantastic. And could you share one internet resource that you use to keep up to date with current events?
I do a lot. I look at McKinsey. They have a great AI platform where they're always kind of bringing in what's going on with the AI space. I mean, having a broad network on LinkedIn, I think is really good. I constantly read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times business sections just because I think I need to stay up to date on that. What else do I look at? There's a couple different other blogs that I've kind of focused on that kind of focus on kind of people analytics and what different people are doing. I look at.
Could you mention those blogs? Do you know names?
I can pull it up. One is Analytics in HR.
Mm-hmm. Oh yes, I know them.
Yes.
They're based in Amsterdam, right?
Yeah, they're based in Amsterdam.
Yeah,
so that's one that I like. And then I kind of also look at a couple different just kind of the technologies out there. They're always kind of adapting and providing content. Vizier actually does a lot of that in that space as well. So I kind of follow them.
Fantastic.
I mean, of course, I always are looking at actual academic research as well, but that's a whole nother world.
It is. By the time it's published, just normally out of date. So.
Exactly.
Exactly. Thank you, with a pinch of salt. What's one thing about your business that you're most excited about today?
My business, I think it's the stories that we tell, and I think that we tell amazing stories. You can just look at the Golden Globe nominations. That obviously our stories are touching people. I think that is what inspires me, and that's what really excites me. We have, as a business, we actually have some of the most diverse storytellers across the media industry. And we're hearing many different people's stories that I think we are very excited to tell, listen to, and present. So that's what excites me.
Fantastic. Well, look, Jesse, you've been an amazing guest. So I really appreciate you taking the time out to join us and providing some actionable advice for our members. So I know they'll be a lot better off for it. So thank you very much for that.
My pleasure, Chris. Thanks.
Give our listeners, if there's one message or one parting piece of guidance that you could give to other HR analytics leaders out there, what would that be? Or HR professionals.
HR professionals?
Yeah, in general, because I put everyone together. I believe that everyone's going to be in this area, in this area or some point or another.
Yeah, I'd say find ways to continually learn. Learning is critical to our organization. If you think about all the research that's coming about the disruptions in the workforce, the best way that we can stay on top of it is by continuing to challenge ourselves and learning more. So there's so many avenues to learn right now. So if you're not carving out space, and find time to do it. So yes, there's platforms, but if you're not making time to really allow yourself to learn something, you're going to constantly be behind. So find that space, take that opportunity.
Fantastic. Well, Jesse, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking the time. Guys, make sure you head over to hrleaders.com. There you'll find all of the show notes on the episode, everything we've been talking about, links to it, everything discussed. Thank you again, Jesse, and I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thanks again.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.